The National Finals Rodeo. Rigged competition and animal cruelty. The National Finals Rodeo, or the NFR, is sometimes referred to as the World Series of Rodeo. Sanctioned by the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, or the PRCA, the NFR is 10 rodeo performances in 10 days in glitzy Las Vegas at the Thomas & Mack Arena. That series determines the so-called champion of each rodeo event. The NFR claims to have the very best animals in the rodeo world. There are no other rodeos in the country during the NFR, so the very best animals are brought in from each PRCA stock contractor. People who have watched past shark rodeo videos have seen animals shocked and otherwise abused to make them appear wild and rank. Here is a picture of a horse shocked in the face with a 5,000 to 6,000 volt electric prod by stock contractor Ike Sankey at the infamous Pendleton Rodeo. But surely, when there are no other rodeos ongoing, that kind of abuse won't happen at the NFR, right? Check out the fellow in the brown vest and black hat. His name is Charles Soilo. Mr. Soilo is the vice chairman of the PRCA board, second only to chairman Keith Martin. Mr. Soilo is also the PRCA's contestant director and saddle bronc representative. Mr. Soilo wears many hats, and he was additionally credited with choosing which horses were brought to the NFR. But there's one more hat that Mr. Soilo wears at the NFR. Watch Mr. Soilo as he slides a virtually invisible device onto the middle finger of his right hand. At first, our shark investigator was uncertain about what the device was. The device was only used on some of the horses, and in those cases there is no question that the behavior of the horses were affected. Since 50% of a rider's score depends on the performance of the animal, that means that the so-called competition of the NFR is corrupted. In this scene, the horse hesitates briefly. But once Mr. Soilo uses his device, the horse takes off like a shot. This indicates that Mr. Soilo's device is probably a shocker, something more akin to a weapon. Mr. Soilo removes his weapon and places it in his pocket. Next, Mr. Soilo scurries off to the next chute, so he'll be ready to shock the next horse. This is apparently Mr. Soilo's only function, to shock horses. Is that the job description of the vice chairman of the board of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association? This horse also hesitates briefly, and for that he gets a taste of Mr. Soilo's weapon. As a result, the horse moves forward and slams his nose against the chute. Whatever Mr. Soilo is using, it certainly is effective. Charles Soilo watches his handiwork for a couple moments. A judge in a striped vest stands just to Mr. Soilo's right. He certainly saw everything that just happened, but the judge does nothing about it. Mr. Soilo removes his weapon with the judge looking right at his hand, and still there is no reaction.
Now we know the judges are in on the fraud.
The next night's performance is more of the same. Mr. Soilo would shock a horse if it hesitated at all. Some horses were shocked even if there was no hesitation. Other horses weren't shocked at all. With 50% of the contestant's score dependent on the behavior of the animal, electroshocking horses is to rodeo what the steroid scandal is to Major League Baseball. This horse, named the High Life Gal, clearly did not want to be in the bucking chute. She dropped her head repeatedly and fought against being forced to buck. Charles Soilo's response is to shock her in the neck. Seconds later, the High Life Gal went down and she did not get back up. Witnesses said it was as if her legs simply stopped working. Was it the shock that caused the High Life Gal to go down? Rodeo people, while never saying what caused her to go down, later claimed that she was all right. In fact, rodeos have a long history of claiming that animals who have died from their injuries were fine. As the horse went into spasms, she was rolled onto a platform so that she could be carried to a trailer.
let's exercise it together. And let's just say a little prayer for a little high life gal. I can tell you, the Servi family.
With assurances the victim will receive good treatment from the rodeo announcer, the crowd breaks out in a cheer.
Are there. They'll put enough manpower on it to take them out, just like you would an injured cowboy. Ladies and gentlemen,
perhaps if they cheered loudly enough, they might relieve their collective guilt for the part they played in the injury of the victim. If you really want to get a feel for the lies told by rodeo announcers, just listen to the following claim as you look into the back of a truck that is empty, but for a winch used to drag injured and dying victims inside.
You know what? That trailer from Charmat is completely outfitted with a floating floor. There is medicines inside there. There's all kinds of anesthesia. There is everything you need to treat an animal. And what we'd like to do is say thank you to Charmat for making it possible to have that kind of unit on hand. And we'd like to know how many of you love our rodeo animals as much as we do. Say a prayer for High Life Gal.
Take another look before they close the gate. Do you see medicines, anesthesia, and everything you need to treat an animal? The habitual lying of rodeo announcers is indicative of the entire rodeo industry. If they didn't abuse animals, rodeo people wouldn't have to say a prayer for their victims, and it is highly doubtful God is impressed with requests that He clean up after the misdeeds of cruel people
who secretly shock animals to make them appear wild and mean.
Back at the chutes, PRCA Vice Chairman of the Board, Charles Soilo, continues his covert shocking of tame, domesticated horses to make them appear wild and rank. But suddenly, for just a moment, Charles Soilo makes the mistake of showing us his palm. A small electric shock device can clearly be seen, secured by a flesh-colored band. Remember this when you hear about wild, rank rodeo animals. Remember this when you hear about animals supposedly born to buck at the rodeo. Remember this when you hear that rodeo is America's sport. Shark released this video evidence to the Las Vegas media. When reporters asked for an explanation of the weapon wielded by PRCA Vice Chairman Charles Soilo and covered up by every judge, stock contractor, and contestant behind the chutes, the PRCA would only release the following statement. Quote, officials are on site monitoring the competition and that all of the rules are in place and enforced. There are veterinarians on site that make sure livestock is properly cared for. PRCA rules allow for the encouragement of horses with the habit of hesitating in the chute in order to provide for the safe exit from the chutes for the livestock and the contestant. Unquote. This statement is meaningless. It doesn't even mention shocking or electricity. It doesn't mention the effect shocking animals would have on scoring. And the so-called encouragement didn't appear to be harmless to the High Life gal. Shark has sent 2 letters to PRCA Chairman Keith Martin requesting information about Vice Chairman Soilo's weapon. Chairman Martin has not responded. Shark has documented many similar misdeeds by PRCA personnel for well over a decade, and the PRCA always runs and hides from the truth. Not very cowboy-like, is it? Rodeo writers refuse to report this story that is to rodeo what the steroid scandal is to baseball. This demonstrates the utter lack of ethics and integrity that permeates the entire rodeo industry. Everyone in the industry is dirty. The writers who speak no evil about rodeo, the camera people who are careful not to shoot instances of animal injuries and deaths or edit them out after the fact, the contestants, the judges, the stock contractors, and the associations all share in the abuse and the cover-up. The only innocents are the animal victims. Corporate sponsors of these cruel and corrupt events include Coca-Cola, Dodge Automobiles, AT&T, Southwest Airlines, Walmart, Sam's Club, Wrangler, Jack Daniels, Bank of America, Holiday Inn, and the U.S. Army. One additional sponsor whose support of rodeo animal abuse is especially egregious is the American Quarter Horse Association, or the AQHA. One would think that the AQHA is concerned about animal welfare, but the AQHA is a strident supporter of rodeo cruelty and a betrayer of horses. Shark will continue to expose rodeo animal abuse, cruelty, and corruption. If you care about animals, please say no to rodeos and to rodeo sponsors. Thank you.